So welcome back. It's very nice to have all four of you now here on stage. This panel is following one question: are rules and ethics for journalism gone? Which kind of presupposes that there might have been a sort of golden age where these rules were really present. I still want to ask a rather drastic question: has there been such a golden age? And if so, when was it? And I'd like to have a small answer of everybody, just to have a global image.
Do you want us to go down the line here? You're up, I guess.
So, do I understand it right? Like, when was the age of golden?
Yeah,
golden.
Exactly.
Well, shortly, something like 100 years after inventing of the printing press. Then it's decline.
Good answer.
I mean, I think journalists and newsrooms are staffed by. They are human beings, and newsrooms are staffed by human beings, so there always are mistakes and misjudgments, but I don't believe there was a moment in time when everything was perfect and that it's so different now. No, I kind of don't accept that as a construct.
Yeah, I think that the problems have changed, probably, and our concept of the problems have changed. From 100 years ago, say, when like the modern era of journalism ethics kind of took hold, and the things that we're facing as journalists, but there's always been a problem with those ethics too.
Yeah, I think I don't also believe in a golden age of journalism. It was funny because with this project, the Enslaver project, we also had some pieces of reporting from the past in Brazil that we use it as sources for our project. And we see that sometimes journalism is far from being objective, even like 100 years ago. Not only objective, but not only, I think, ethical. So I don't believe in a past golden age. I prefer to think of golden sparks of journalism that you can have and you will still have on the future.
Where we are now is that a recent survey found that more Americans have confidence in the ICE agency than in mainstream media. In the past, we turned to the ethical principles of journalism to regain that trust, especially after major crises. But can even impeccable ethics still be a response to the plummeting trust today? And I'd like to hear a perspective from the US, but also from Czech Republic and Brazil.
I just want to ask, where is that study from, and why are those two extremely, diverse things being compared to each other? That to me is my first question, and I think, there's a lot of things that you could say about like the decline of trust in this country, in the U.S. And a lot of that has been a very, there's two things. There's the rise of social media. There's the rise of like being able to access voices that previously hadn't had any access points, which is super, super important. And then the other side of that is that we have had a concerted effort on the part of leaders of our country to discredit and demolish trust in the media. And they've been doing that for the last decade plus. So I think that there's, it's just a false equivalency to start with ICE and media. But the point remains, like there are plenty of ways back.
So I agree with Julie. I think that's a weird and probably false comparison, but I do think we have a trust problem, and one of the ways that I like to think about this is that journalists should be perhaps less concerned about, going on some kind of campaign to regain trust, and instead thinking about whether their work is consistently trustworthy. Is our work trustworthy? Are we being transparent? Are we correcting our errors? Are we doing the due diligence? Are we, digging into important topics? And I think that is the thing that we can control. I don't know that we can really control how people react to us. Although, it's important to think about it, but to me, doing the work right is the more crucial thing.
And just to add real quick to that, I think that there are external forces that are trying to delegitimize journalism, and then there are the internal forces that we, in newsrooms every day, put upon ourselves that, delegitimize the work that we're doing. And so I think, again, that's where we want to re-examine ethics and ask, how are we actually serving the goal of, protecting small d democracy?
It's really interesting because this brings me to the next question I have. You highlighted it already before in your presentation, the challenges that ethics and rules are facing right now. I would like to ask this question now to Pavla and to Bruno. What are the most serious threats right now, those who have really an immediate effect on rules and ethics in journalism?
We are being killed. I mean, that's probably the biggest threat right now because, and it's once again, it's such a complex issue. I mean, you have politicians who are saying we are the enemies of the state, we are enemy of the people, and then you have total crazy people like in Mexico who just go and kill the journalist. I mean, I don't agree with you, so for me, the best way, the easiest way is to, kill you. And ethics is super important right now, but, well, let's not die first.
Yeah, I will also add, I think the financial ways to kill journalism, because we have all these big tech problems. I think every newsroom in the world was faced with a challenge with Google and AI researchers syncing out our audiences. I think it's also important to think this because when you consider most of the fact-checking agencies and projects in the world, they were financed for several years for the same groups that control the big media and big techs. And now they're taking this money out, and at the same time, they're implementing all this kind of AI search. So I think there's also these financial ways to kill journalism or try to hinder journalism. I think there's another problem that we have, and I think there's a problem that we still don't have answers.
To talk about another ethical challenge, I have a question to Margaret Sullivan and Julie Gerstein. Can you give us some examples of the notion of both-sideism that you talked about? Some examples of where that is not an appropriate approach, perhaps something from the current news cycle?
Yeah, I mean, in the United States, we have, a president who lies a lot. I mean, it's proven, it's been documented, books have been written about it, and it's simply the case. And so when we take President Trump's statements at face value and we magnify them in a headline or a news alert, or we treat it as equal with a truthful statement, we are engaging in a very, bad kind of both-sidesism. And, similarly, there's a whole question about whether, Trump hasn't really been doing rallies recently because he's become more isolated, but when he was doing these rallies of hour-long rants, was it a good idea to take them live and broadcast them live? Because what you were doing there was basically giving credence and handing a megaphone. So that's, the classic thing about both-sidesism is climate change. Some people believe that climate change occurs and is caused by human beings. Some don't. That's the classic both-sidesism. But now I think we see it in politics and have to be super careful about not doing that.
Yeah, I think that the thing about Trump especially is that this is, the chaos is the point. So the point is to constantly have a stream of lies so that there cannot be accountability. So, it's shock and awe. And so the idea of what's happened is that it's almost like newsrooms have suspended their editorial judgment because there is this thing that's constantly happening that produces news stories.
And there's even a phrase for that, flooding the zone. Flooding the zone with all this garbage. It's a good word. You know, and how do you even deal with it? Do you have a full-time fact checker who's like right there every second? You know, how do you deal with it in the course of a single story or a whole news cycle?
Yeah, I think you're touching on something really interesting, which is the future. For now, we talked about what does not really work in this field, but how does this, or can this framework, and maybe also for us who are young journalists, how can we change, or how can the framework change to really foster rules and ethics in the future? That's an open question to...
I mean, we should have stories to share, big stories, big narratives as a society, and we need them to understand what's important to us as society, and we need to shape in this way the bigger public good. You know, we really need to put a brake on individualism and have the common narrative, what is the public good, and then go in that direction, and that it will bring the ethics. At least I believe so, because we will understand that, okay, I am going, you know, to have less money, let's say, or I am going to, you know, I would need to compromise my, I don't know, like super well-being, but it's in a public good. And I am going to do it, I'm going to sacrifice my part of my benefits because I believe it's worth it for the rest of the society. And I want my kids to actually have a better future, and I am going to sacrifice, and it's really like walking them to school instead of driving them by car. Like, it's not really a sacrifice. Sacrifice is a stupid word. But I do understand what is better, bigger good than the good for myself.
But does this mean, for example, when you say it's a public good, it should be free for everybody? How do you see it, like in reality, for the functioning of media in general?
I mean, I live in Czech Republic, but I spent a lot of time in Denmark. And I think that comparing to Denmark, Czechs don't understand, you know, the common good of the society or of the nation. You know, we are kind of like, whoever will put a flag on a car is an idiot. We do it only when we win hockey, ice hockey. And in Denmark, no, you know, you celebrate by putting out the flag of Denmark. And when I came like, ooh, this is the nation of Nazis. And then I found out that this is their understanding, that they are part of a bigger
entity,
bigger idea that they share. And that was the point when I started to think about like, okay, maybe they do understand, they do understand what is public good and what is the bigger good. And actually that's why they are doing so well.
I think I would also add something that sometimes journalists, they tend to work a lot for other journalists. I'm going to give an example in Brazil. We also had our Trump, who is in jail now in Brazil. Yeah. And we had this time, which also relates to this both sides. During the pandemic, and he was doing his speeches, and all journalists were covering him and reproducing all the lies about the pandemic and COVID and everything. At some point, the journalist decided not to go there and just transmit and make his speech published. And they decided also to join, like the big media in Brazil, and count themselves what were the names of the numbers of the pandemic, how the disease was spreading. And this was very important during the crisis, because there was no point on just like reproducing the lies of the former president. So I think sometimes journalists should also think, and this is good for us in the beginning of our careers, are we just reproducing what other journalists are doing? Are we just talking to other journalists? Are just framing the way we should frame? And sometimes not doing the conventional way can be good for us, like to skip this kind of these predators that they fed on this kind of news cycle.
I love that you said that, because, you know, we've been dealing with Trump's White House kicking journalists out of the press pool since his latest and hopefully last term. And I actually think this is an opportunity because it gets people out of this discursive echo chamber where we're just repeating and repeating and repeating, and it's almost like press release writing at a certain point. And the thing I think that will save journalism, my hope, and I think that this is also, to tie it to AI as well, is this will, if we can work together and if we can kind of understand this importance and our role, what we can do as journalists that AI can't do is pick up the phone, knock on a door, talk to people, put information together in a critical thinking way, and that is what we need to think of this as an opportunity to do that.
I just have a last question because... Stephanie? Okay, thank you very much.
No last question. We'll never know.
Thank you very much.
Okay.